Israel looked like he was in slow motion. He looked like he couldn't get off. He looked like he was really stiff tonight. He looked very slow.
And you look very dumb, Dana. Welcome back everybody to Keating KTV. With how dominant Sean Strickland looked against Israel Adesanya, many people are looking for excuses as to why it happened. Unfortunately, this also includes Dana White, so let's see what he said.
Even in the fifth round, when everybody knew he needed a knockout to win the fight, there was no sense of urgency to try to finish the fight. So I don't know if he's hurt, if he's, or he just, tonight's that night.
Yeah. Did you speak to him in the cage at all?
What's that?
Did you speak?
Yeah. I said, you okay? He said, I'll talk to you later.
So aside from him saying that he's slow, sluggish, he wasn't blah blah blah, he also said that he didn't even look for the finish even when he knew that in the fifth round he was losing. And I'm sorry, but did we even watch the same fight? Because that was exactly the round in which Adesanya threw the most amount of shots. And then he goes ahead and questions whether or not Adesanya had a personal issue. And obviously Adesanya said that he will have to quote unquote speak with Dana White after the fight, which is simply a bunch of excuses. That's just it. But let's just go ahead and talk about how Adesanya did not look off. Before we get to the actual fight, take a look at how Dana White is reacting to wrapping the belt around Sean Strickland. He does not want him to be the champion. So there are two key principles that you have to understand. Adesanya is a defensive, counter-punching, outside fighter. Sean Strickland is a come-forward, inside brawler. And Adesanya is the type of fighter that always requires a lot of distance. With a lot of distance, he can do a lot of work. He can utilize his leg kicking from the southpaw stance, and he will have enough room to actually have feints work in the orthodox stance. Now, the reason why a lot of fighters who were not able to beat Adesanya failed at closing the gap and staying in the face of Adesanya mainly came down to the fact that all of them showed Adesanya too much respect, first of all, and then second of all, they lacked the ability to come forward by simply walking in and not being afraid. Guys like Robert Whittaker, who have a very explosive style, who always have to jump in and blitz in, cannot have a consistent in-your-face style because they themselves aren't even comfortable fighting at that range. That is why Adesanya was able to knock out Robert Whittaker when he was blitzing in. That is why when Paulo Costa got knocked out, he was looking very hesitant to even throw his punches, which obviously made him slower and more predictable to counter. Or you have somebody like Derek Brunson who was simply begging to get knocked out. And so all these guys, in terms of a fight philosophy, carried the same dynamic and the same attitude. They were all so tense, they were all so hyper, they were all so insecure about their own abilities that they just wanted to hope that something landed and landed big. Sean Strickland, on the other hand, looked like he was just walking in the park. He wasn't even tired after the fifth round. Throughout the entire fight, he fought at a very consistent pace with a very calm approach, perfect defense, which a lot of people just don't end up mentioning, where he ended up using the Philly shell. Now the Philly shell is the best inside fighting defensive style you can have. At a longer range, you can get exposed for your weakness and your open guard. That is exactly why Adesanya was able to land 1-2 at a long range, but not in the close range. And when you're in the Philly shell, you can also defend your body perfectly in the pocket, and when your opponent throws a shot, you simply roll away and then slip the overextended punch that your opponent just threw, and then just come back with a big counter right. And that is the big thing. Adesanya was not able to counter all night long. It's very simple and it might even shock you, but if you don't give the counterpunch fighter a counterpunch window, he will not have any offense. And that was exactly what happened. Sean Strickland was very patient. Even when he did connect with a big punch, he didn't overextend, he didn't get overzealous, he didn't smother his work, he didn't throw too many punches like Alex Pereira did and leave himself exposed to a knockout. And in general, he fought a way smarter fight than Israel Adesanya. I know, Adesanya is the fighter that is known for his brain smarts, for his ring IQ, for his fighting intelligence. Everything in that matter was something that a lot of people associated with Adesanya, but however, this time around, as bitter as it is and as weird as it is visually, a fighter like Sean Strickland was the smarter fighter on that night. Another reason why Adesanya just looked completely off is exactly because of that reason. His defense did not work, so he had to try to rely on his offense, and that is his biggest weakness. Adesanya has never had the best offense. I have been studying Israel Adesanya for years now. I've made a few amount of film studies, and one thing that I've always seen that his best work always comes off on the back foot. He has never had a knockout where the opponent is up against the fence, where he is combination punching and creating an opening on an opponent who has a very tight guard, nothing like that. And we have literally seen, if you don't throw at Adesanya, he will not throw at you, and the most he will throw is a leg kick. Look at the fight with Yoel Romero. And when that fight ended, you couldn't hear the end of it from Dana White, and now all of a sudden he's making excuses for him. You see, the biggest asset and the biggest skill in the game of Israel Adesanya is his kickboxing pedigree, but at the same time, that is also his biggest weakness. I'm going to be giving you guys a few examples here. When Anderson Silva fought Damian Maia in Abu Dhabi back in whenever, that was considered the most boring fight in the history of the UFC, and that is also why for a long time the UFC wasn't able to go back to Abu Dhabi fight. And so what happened in that fight? Because Anderson Silva is so defensively minded and also reliant on the back foot, he simply had an opponent that was a BJJ practitioner and wanted to get the fight to the ground. And what did he do? He had a 5-round staring contest where he barely came forward, where he barely had any openings to counter, and he did not even shoot in for an action. Does that sound similar? That is also how Israel Adesanya fought Yoel Romero. But unlike Israel Adesanya, Anderson Silva actually had a lot of skill on the mat. But why didn't he even try to adapt that game plan and fight in a different way? Well, first of all, he was winning the fight, that's for one. But second of all, he had an opponent who was better than him on the mat, so it was not even smart for him to go there. But he did have the ability, for example, when he went ahead and fought Dan Henderson and took him down and submitted him. Another example of an all-time great who had a big weakness that got exposed was when John Jones fought Alexander Gustafsson for the very first time. John Jones has always been the biggest fighter in the division with the tallest reach, so he always was able to stick on the outside and do his thing. And so he was able to zone out these blown up middleweights like Lyoto Machida, Chael Sonnen, Rashad Evans, Vitor Belfort, one can even say Rampage Jackson, and especially Daniel Cormier, who was like 5'9" with his 70-inch reach or something. It was crazy. So he always had a big advantage in that physical aspect. So he never really had to force his way in. He never really had to come forward and fight an offensive fight. And so when Alexander Gustafsson came in and took the outside away from John Jones was forced to fight on the front foot, which he had never done before, and he got completely exposed for it. And luckily for John Jones, he had a pedigree and a background in wrestling. So when the third round ended and the championships rounds came in, the experience that John Jones had over Alexander Gustafsson was huge because Alexander Gustafsson was completely gassed out. And additionally, with that pedigree that he had in wrestling, he was able to take him down and adjust his game plan and adapt to the situation, something Israel Adesanya could never do. Or for example, when Lyoto Machida was taking the outside on John Jones and he was pop-shotting him, tagging him, hurting him, what happened in the second round? He completely changed his game around, put him in a clinch and choked him out standing. Okay, so now that we have established that, can we expect Israel Adesanya to do those things? Of course not. He hasn't even tried to take somebody down. He hasn't even tried to expand his arsenal. He hasn't even tried to become a better inside fighter, a better offensive fighter. Another example would be Conor McGregor. Conor has always been the taller, rangier fighter at featherweight, right? He was always coming forward, but he was always at the end of his reach. But as soon as he moved up to a higher division and a higher weight class, for example, when he fought Khabib Nurmagomedov in the pocket, he was getting beat. Against Floyd Mayweather, he was getting beat. His one-dimensional style of sticking behind the straight punches got beat. So what happened? Even though it was not a popular decision, Conor worked on his inside fighting and became a better inside fighter, and by the time he fought Dustin Poirier for the second time, his boxing was very good. So yeah, for me, the winner is clear. Sean Strickland completely exposed Israel Adesanya. Exposed him for his weaknesses, exposed him for his lack of ability to adapt, and he showed that with a clear, concise, patient, and a defensively sound game plan while coming forward, you can beat Israel Adesanya without giving him too much to work off of. And that's just it. However, what I find really hypocritical and very, very delusional is that he immediately gave Adesanya the rematch. He's ready to give Adesanya a rematch. But what happened to Aljamain Sterling? In my opinion, even though he got knocked out, he was in a way more competitive fight than Israel Adesanya. When you get completely walked around for 5 rounds straight, then you have an issue. Let's just say that Sean Strickland did end up knocking out Adesanya in the first round. Okay, sure, give him the immediate rematch, no problem, you know? Because you never know what could have happened in those later rounds. But now we did know what happened, and he did nothing with it. He got completely dominated. It's like when TJ Dillashaw fought Renan Barão. And also why I believe like he has a favoritism for Adesanya is because when Alex Pereira got knocked out in the rematch, he was like, okay, he's gonna move up now. No, there's no rematch. He's not gonna get a rematch. This and that. It's crazy to me. You gave Alex Pereira an early title shot and he won a title. And then, you know, he was kind of doing well in the first round and then he gets knocked out. And then you're like, no, there's no trilogy. How can it even be? Where is the logic in that? Where is the consistency in that? And look, I'm not doubting that Israel Adesanya can make adjustments and that he can have a more competitive fight and that he can beat Sean Strickland, but the way that things stand right now, his abilities to adapt, his abilities to fight better and fight differently don't really shine that well. So I would have to favor Sean Strickland to beat Adesanya again in the rematch. So let us see what the future of the division will be looking like. As always, in the end, only time will tell what will truly happen. For now, I have been Keenan from Keenan KTV, signing off. Later.